Welcome to the Goud Crowd Internet Radio Show. You can listen to us here, well, wherever you're listening. I don't know where you're listening, but you can listen to us on X. You can listen to us at my handle, which is Goud, Goud, the number 4 Utah. You can also listen at kmmu.org and at Mainstream Media Utah at their YouTube channel. I don't know, do we have Rumble? I'm not sure. And also at their X handle. And
we have YouTube, we have Rumble, we have X, and we have our website.
Okay, well, there you go. I just realized that my mother told me that she cannot figure out how to listen. So let me send her a link real quick. So just give me a second. Okay, so, well, first of all, happy Liberation Day. As President Trump said today when he took the oath of office. It's a fantastic day in America. I think after listening to his inauguration speech, I am more hopeful than ever that he's going to fix a lot of the problems that Biden caused over the last 4 years, and really our establishment has caused probably over the last 30 years. So, well, it's a great day. I've been watching the inauguration. I watched the whole thing, and then I just had the TV on. Because there's been so many cool things happening. Although I will say I missed him signing the executive order, so I'll have to check that out a little bit later because I was prepping for the show. Now today we'll actually have Representative Trevor Lee's going to call in to talk about his bill. So it's HB 77, and this is a bill that's intended at getting pride flags out of classrooms, which I think is a good thing. And then we're also going to have, I think Tracy Halverson's going to call in to talk about the Sundance Film Festival. As many of you know, we as taxpayers subsidize it. And there's some issues with us doing that. And then we're also going to have Olivia Dawn call in, and she's going to talk about her nightmarish experience with the DCFS. And I think you'll want to hear this because, our DCFS is problematic as it is, and I've covered it in the weekly rundown before, where we had that poor kid, Gavin Peterson, who died, even though multiple people reported his abuse to the DCFS, and then they didn't really do anything. And then you'll hear about this story, which is them basically going after parents for no reason. They had got a report, but what happened was it was blown way out of proportion, and it doesn't seem like there's good guardrails on what's going on over there. So, yeah, so before Trevor Lee calls in, I just want to talk about a couple of things here. First, like I said, I thought Trump's speech was fantastic. I actually did something I don't usually do. I don't really put on mainstream media because honestly, it's just annoying. And they're always pushing their stupid agenda that is clearly anti-American. It's anti-regular people, and they think we're stupid. And that's always clear to me every time I turn them on. But today I turned on ABC when I was watching the inauguration, and it did not disappoint because their analysis was so... All I could think when I was listening to it is, you guys are completely irrelevant, and this is why. It's exactly the stuff you're talking about. So if you watched it, I'm sure you think you saw that Michelle Obama didn't show up, right? And they did an analysis of it saying that she was, after the 2017 inauguration, she left and was unhappy because she thought there was not enough diversity on Trump's side of the inauguration. And so apparently she decided not to go this time because of diversity concerns. Like, please, whatever. Talk about, all I could think is you're irrelevant. Nobody cares. And even if you were going to look at diversity, they're actually, the second lady is of Indian origin. I mean, the vice president has biracial kids. There's inherent diversity on that side at this point. But the reality is that this election was about people rejecting that entire mindset. None of us want to be judged on our race, on our sex, on our sexual preferences. We just want to be judged on our accomplishments. And that's one of the reasons why Trump won. And it's a big reason why the Democrats lost, because they keep continuing to push that crap. Anyway, so watching ABC actually was entertaining now. It feels very different than 2016 and 2017. Back then, it felt like we were constantly being attacked if you supported Trump, and it would have an impact on people I knew who would say, "Oh, like, why do you support him? He's racist, this and that." Now I feel like he won the popular vote. He overcame impossible obstacles, including the entire media being against him, tech companies being against him. Now I know that, now Mark Zuckerberg and that I can't remember his name, but the Google CEO and the Apple CEO, they're all bending the knee to him. But the reality is they're only doing that because he beat them. And the minute that the Democrats win anything, those people will turn on a dime. They are leftists. They are evil. Those are evil, evil people. Mark Zuckerberg is an evil man. I think he's responsible for killing people because of the censorship he did on Facebook. And so they're there because they lost, but they'll turn on a dime, and I'm hoping everybody around Trump understands that. But still, the point is that he overcame all of that. He won. He got the popular vote. We have nothing to be ashamed of. Our views are the majority. The majority of Americans want illegal aliens deported. We have nothing to be ashamed of if that's what you support. I support it. I want all the illegal aliens out of my country. We didn't ask you to come here. This is not your country. I frankly don't care how long you've been here. Because the reality is that you've been breaking the law the entire time. You've taken a job from an American. You're undercutting our wages. You're taking our resources. You got to go. And we can be proud. We can be Trump supporters, support the MAGA movement, and we can get this done. So the one thing I'll tell everyone, though, is we're going to have to keep pushing because we're in Utah. And unfortunately, we have a rhino problem here, including, I would say, with our newest senator. And so that's going to require people to constantly put pressure on these politicians to support Trump and to stay and to be conservative. Because I think inherently, a lot of Utah politicians are pro-open borders. They support a lot of leftist causes. I mean, with Curtis, he supports this climate change garbage. And when I say that, this is what I mean. If you've ever looked at climate change stuff, there's no way to actually measure it, meaning that there have been studies done, but then they use models to be able to say that the temperature will go up 2 degrees in 1,000 years. But then they try to validate that model by seeing what happened in the past, and they can't do it. But they'll still use the model and pretend like it's making an accurate prediction. And so that's just something to think about. I just think the whole thing is a grift and a scam, and he pushes it because his donors benefit from it. And then in turn, I think he benefits as well. But let's get on with this because I just want to show you a couple of things that I thought were kind of interesting. And the first one is this. As many of you know, I am a homosexual. And so there are sometimes things bother me. And one of the things that bothers me is when people do not dress appropriately for an event. So these are the shoes that Representative Celeste Malloy wore to the inauguration. Okay, I am sorry, but Converse shoes are completely inappropriate for an inauguration. This is just fashion faux pas. I appreciate that at least she wore red ones, but come on. Now she's not the type, I think, that'll wear high heels, but she could have at least worn a nice flat red shoe, right? I mean, this is a formal event inaugurating our new president. You don't wear tennis shoes. God, it's so trashy. I can't imagine what even going through your head that you think that's okay. It's so trashy. And I wish, and I did this. The worst part about this is I know that she has gay people that she talks to, like gay friends and stuff. Did none of them think to tell her, can you please not wear Converse shoes to the inauguration? That's not appropriate. Maybe she needs new gay friends. Okay, so, and by the way, if anybody wants to call in, feel free to call in. It's 385-899-2134. And if you just started listening, you are listening to the Goud Crowd radio show. On the shoe thing, I'll just say this. There were also some men that were wearing inappropriate shoes. I saw Hakeem Jeffries, and he had on those, Cole Haan has the shoes where the top of it is like a dress shoe, and then the bottom is a tennis shoe that's more comfortable. And look, I'm fine with people wearing those in certain circumstances, but I don't think wearing those when the bottom is white and it basically looks like a tennis shoe was appropriate at the inauguration. Like, come on. You could actually wear dress shoes, right? And I have dress shoes that are normal dress shoes, and they're all comfortable. You can get comfortable dress shoes. Now it's a little different for women because I think high heels are a little more taxing on your feet. But at the same time, I'm not saying Celeste Malloy had to wear high heels. She could have just worn a flat. And I'll tell you, I don't usually talk about fashion, so this is awkward. And then here's my other one for you. Here's our governor. So our governor was running around, I guess, photobombing actual conservative governors. If you know who these, like, I don't know, I'm not sure who this guy is over here, but Ron DeSantis. This is Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa. She's like the DeSantis of the Midwest, very conservative. This is Kemp. Georgia, I think he's conservative. Huckabee, and then Gianforte, the governor of Montana. I mean, this guy's so conservative that he beat up a reporter and still got elected. So it's a joke. But anyway, the point being, though, is that I think he's trying to make us believe that he is much more conservative than what he actually is. And I just tweeted about this and said, the people in these photos are thinking, who's the gay intern taking photos with us? Oh, you're the governor of Utah. Oops, my bad. Because that's what they were thinking. If you've ever met Governor Cox, he's got that, he puts off those gay vibes. I will say, though, that I've lived here for almost 5 years now, and a lot of men in Utah tend to be a little bit more effeminate than what I would expect, especially straight guys. Gay guys is different, right? But for straight men, I find it kind of confusing. So let's take a look at Trevor Lee's bill before he comes on, so we can talk through this. So one of the things that's kind of interesting about Utah is there is a heavy push to normalize transgenderism. And it's still, the thing that surprises me is that it is still going on. I think at the national level, it's very clear that we, meaning those of us who are opposed to the trans ideology, we've won the argument. Hands down, I have no doubt that people have rejected the idea that boys can become girls, or vice versa. They've rejected the idea that boys should be able to play girl sports. Or I should say, boys who are having mental health issues should be able to play girl sports. Rejected the idea of, being able to use the opposite sex bathroom, and embraced the idea that there's only two genders, which it's bizarre we have to say it, but that's the reality of it, right? But in Utah, we clearly have not completely defeated this agenda at all. We're still working on it. I mean, we still have pornographic books in the schools, and that's part of the trans ideology, is that they have, you see, the way, this is how I explain it to people. If you're gay, it is something's wired in you. I don't know if it's genetic, biological, whatever it is, but you'll have that attraction to someone of the same sex, and it is what it is. But it's a natural, it just happens, right? Nobody has to talk to you about it. It is. In the same way, I think that straight people have an attraction to the opposite sex. Gay people just have that same attraction to the same sex. With the trans ideology, though, you have to normalize it and teach children about it in order to make them think it is it It is an option and acceptable. And so everything you see in Utah aimed at schools is aimed at normalizing transgenderism and increasing the number of children that suffer from gender dysphoria. Flags is part of that. So Representative Lee has proposed a bill this. So I do have some concerns about this bill, and the main one being that you can see in here it tells you what flags you can fly, right? Let's hear. You can do the national or the POW MIA flag, fine. Flag that represents an Indian tribe, city, municipality, political subdivision of the state, and I'm good with a lot of these. The military, obviously U.S. flag. The one that concerns me is a flag. You can do a flag that is temporarily displayed as part of a school curriculum. And I'm going to ask Representative Lee about this, but my concern is that people would be able to, meaning activist teachers, and yes, there are a lot of activist teachers in Utah, that they will be able to drive a truck through this exception, and then we'll still have pride flags in classrooms. And I wonder why we don't just ban pride flags explicitly. So this affirmatively says what flags you can fly in a classroom, but what if they added a sentence also saying no pride flags can be flown in the classroom ever, and they shouldn't be flown in a classroom. There's no need for it. And so that is a question I'll ask him when he comes on today, because I want to make sure that when we pass bills like this, that they're actually effective and that they solve the problem on the first round. It's a lot easier if we can just get this stuff done and not have to keep coming back over and over again to try to fix bills that have issues. And I'll just, for example, last year we got HB 257 passed, and that's the bill that restricts men from going into women's locker rooms and bathrooms. It's not a perfect bill. And when I testified in support of it, I noted that it was not a perfect bill and that we would have preferred a categorical ban on men going into women's locker rooms or bathrooms. Instead, what we got is a man can go into a woman's locker room after he's gotten some form of gender confirmation surgery and an amended birth certificate. That amended birth certificate thing is a conversation for another day. And they can still go into the women's restroom. So we're talking about men with mental health problems that think that they're women can go into the bathroom and use it as long as they don't cause alarm. And it's such a vague standard. It's going to be difficult to enforce. And it would have been better just to say you can't go into women's bathroom. You can't go into women's locker room. A lot of times we show, instead, like truly caring about someone going through that, you would tell them the truth, right? What I mean is, instead of using their preferred pronouns, letting them use the bathroom that they think they should be able to use, you would tell them, you are a man and you can never become a woman. And we acknowledge that you can never become a woman. So we're not going to let you go into the women's bathroom, and we're not going to let you go into the women's locker room. That's it. Done. But we're in Utah, and so, and let me just add, like, if you're uncomfortable with that, and you're someone that has transitioned, you can go use an individual restroom. But it's Utah, and so people tend to be soft on these issues. And so instead of dealing with it in that clear, concise manner, we did a bill where they can still go into the bathrooms. And I think it's we'll have to see how it all works out. But it'll be kind of interesting. We'll have to see how it works out. And I don't know where this all goes and whether it's going to be an effective bill. But hopefully what we can do is revisit it and amend it and fix the law. And I feel like that might be more possible now, because before, Kira Birkeland, when she was still in the legislature, no other legislator would be willing to go and amend her bill because it's like a personal affront to her or something, I assume. But now that she's gone, moved to Montana or whatever is she doing, we can actually maybe deal with the issue and get it fixed. And I'm hoping that we can do that in one of these future legislative sessions. I don't know if it'll happen this session because I haven't really talked to any legislators about it in a more detailed manner, but maybe like next year we could get this done and fix it. So that's kind of my thinking on that is that we need to it would be good to get these done the first time around. And so this is an example where we can maybe get this nipped in the bud. Okay. So we'll talk about that when he comes on. Kind of related, and I'll just add this too, kind of related to this is what happened at that Sundance Film Festival. So let me see. Can you see what you can't see it. Okay, cool. I didn't know if I switched screens of what I'm looking at, if you can see that, but it looks like you cannot. So let me do this. I'm going to show you this trans agenda and the. Here. Let's see if this works. Okay. So I tell you, one of the reasons I stopped sharing in between is because I feel like you never know what'll pop up. It could be something embarrassing. I was thinking, when they had that bailout of Silicon Valley Bank, the Utah tech leads, this woman, Sunny Washington, she was holding the Zoom call to talk about what's going to happen. Because remember, Utah, that Silicon Valley Bank had to be bailed out because it was going under, and it funds all these startups in Utah and their founders. Their founders get all sorts of stuff like preferred mortgages and personal loans and all sorts of goodies. So during her call, people kept, it was insane. People kept, I guess, photo bombing it. Is that maybe that what you call it? It would be like this guy would join, and then he would take over the screen, and it would be like porn. And it's just I don't know. It was crazy. So obviously awkward for everybody watching, but she's like trying to get it under control. And then when she gets one person under control, someone else does it, and they do the same thing. I've never seen anything so crazy in my life. But anyway, that makes me kind of nervous when I'm like, let me show you this now. Let me show you something on my screen. I'm just realizing that this didn't change. So hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And let me share this with you. There we go. Okay. So here we go. And I don't know if all of you have seen this, but this weekend, Sundance Film Festival had their training for, so I'm going to shrink it a little bit. Their training for their volunteers for the upcoming festival, right? Just to give you some context here, the state of Utah gave them $1.8 million last year in a taxpayer subsidy to get them to stay here because they were making some noise about how they're going to leave the state and go to Colorado or I don't know, wherever it is they wanted to go. And so we gave them money to get them to stay because I guess this must be a big driver of tourism in Park City. Granted, I guess one question I have is, does Park City really have tourism issues in the winter? Because I feel like, isn't the ski season and shouldn't it be full of people anyway? But the point being that we gave them $1.8 million. They stayed. So during their training, they were giving out pronoun pins to their volunteers. And, we're sitting here as citizens trying to fight the trans agenda. And then our government is handing our money to organizations that are promoting the trans agenda and undermining our efforts. In this case, the $1.8 million was actually requested by Senator Mike McKell. If you know who he is, he's the governor's brother-in-law. And he's kind of a strange person. But, I'll just say it this way. I saw these photos of him, so I've been here for like 5 years, and I think I was doing the weekly rundown, and I did a report on something he did, and I found a photo, and it turns out I think this is what drives the way he acts, is he used to be fat, and now he's skinny and can run like a 4.5 minute mile. And so I think like when people do that, sometimes they just act strange, right? Like I think they have a lot of insecurities from when they were fat, and that carries over to when they were skinny. So if you're always skinny, fit, whatever, you don't have that same insecurity because you've always been that way. Anyway, that's mine. So he's kind of a strange dude, and he requested the $1.8 million so that Sundance Film Festival would stay here. And then Tracy Halverson actually posted about it last year. So let's see here. This was her post. Now, Tracy was saying that. Now, Tracy was talking about a different aspect of this, right? Because Sundance has a lot of kind of these like risque films, and they advertise about it. I think if you look at this one, according to Rolling Stone, the 2023 Sundance Film Festival, which I assume that taxpayers also subsidize, was horny as hell. There was plenty of wild sex on display at the Park City, Utah Fest's in-person return, and it was all the better for it. So, if you look at this post, Tracy Halverson is saying that that Utah legislators are compromising our values and morals to attract the type of tourism that would show up for movies that are, risque and explicitly sexual. And I think she may have a valid point here. Now, on top of that, we have them also promoting the trans agenda, which is, personal bugaboo of mine. And I don't understand why, if we are a conservative state and we are, I think most people agree with me that we need to completely 100% eradicate the trans agenda from our government, why it is that we would fund something like this, right? Now, let me just add that one other piece here I wanted to show you guys, and that is on this trans agenda front. I think, I was saying a minute ago that I think on the national level, we have 100% won the issue, right? So my understanding is that one of the executive orders Trump's going to sign is going to say that there is only two genders, male and female. Part of what he's going to do is he's actually going to discharge all trans members of the military. And for those of you who don't realize this, what happens is when you transition, let me put it, when you're in the military, you're supposed to be able to go and deploy if necessary to fight in wars, right? And there are different reasons why you could become non-deployable. So, for example, let's say that you're pregnant. You're a woman and you're pregnant. You become non-deployable, and so you cannot be deployed during that time of pregnancy. And I don't know exactly for how long afterwards, although hopefully it's for some period after, right? So you can spend some time with your child. If you're another one that I know about, because I have a friend who's telling me this, if you're HIV positive and you're in the military, you are non-deployable. At least this was the case a few years ago. And I think some of that is because, let's say you're on a battlefield and it gets hurt, maybe they don't want, the blood, there could be blood issues, right? So that's an issue. That's how they deal with that. If you're trans and you transition, you're going to be non-deployable until you stabilize in your new gender. And so let's say that takes a year, let's say that takes 2 years because you're taking hormones, and then you get surgeries and there's recovery time. That just is inherently unfair to all the other soldiers who are, trying to be in a deployable status. And I think it means that you should be separated. The other piece of this is, and I'll say this because I think this is a distinction as to why there's not the same issue with gay service members as there is with trans ones. With gays, you don't have that, right? Because like I'm a gay service member. If there's no issue with me. Someone's trying to call me. There's no issue with me needing to be non-deployable because I'm attracted to men. Like that just isn't a thing. And so that's a distinction between that LGB and then the TQ, everything else that comes after that. I don't even know all the stuff they list in there. So that's why I think what he's going to do makes a lot of sense, right? And people in that situation should go and get those treatments through their private sector healthcare and in their private jobs, not through the military. The military's job is not to be your healthcare provider for problems you had before you went in. So now let me just so that's fine. But then, like I was saying, in Utah, I don't think we're not able to just like we're not able to eradicate the trans. I don't want to say kill it because then you know what'll happen. They'll be like, oh, he said kill trans people. I'm not saying that. What I am saying though is that we're not able to eradicate the trans agenda completely. And so what that's doing is it's constantly popping up in new locations. So let me just give you this example. And I've seen people post about this on X. But there was this resident assistant at USU, so Utah State University, who is a trans female. So that means it's a man who thinks he's a woman in college who is living in the woman's dorm now. So, and apparently, I mean, part of what happened here is that HB 257 did not address this. So now we've got kind of a hole in the bill because I don't think any of us, when I was helping with this, I wasn't thinking about colleges. I haven't been in college in quite some time, so it's not at the top of my mind. In fact, I've been out. I mean, in law school, I graduated in 2003. I've been out of all schools for like 22 years. So this is like totally not on my mind at all. But they have a man living with women in their dorm room in a female dorm. So this is just a real problem, and it just seems like we're not able to just get this eradicate it completely through the system. I almost wonder if it would be useful for the legislature to come up with one big bill that would where we could list every single issue and just take care of the problem all at once. It just seems like that would be a lot easier than what we're doing right now. Hold on, let me just text my little friend here and see if he's going to call in. So anyway, so that's my thinking on that. That's kind of why I see this as a problem. And it seems like a Utah-specific problem to me because for some reason, even though we won the trans agenda on the national level, I don't think we've gotten there yet in Utah. And part of it is there's a lot of liberal white females in Utah. And that's where this problem, I think, stems from. They tend to be the most susceptible to, like propaganda, to the trans agenda, and this type of stuff. And I think that's why we have a bigger problem here than Utah, because we're a little bit more of a white state, and we have a lot more liberal white ladies than I have met anywhere else in my entire life. And I've been to some pretty liberal places. I don't know why I don't run into them like I do here. Maybe they seek me out. I'm not sure. Okay. So anyway, so that's kind of like, we just constantly have a problem where we can't eradicate this trans agenda because there's so many places where it has been just like burrowed into the government at every single level. And a lot of that is because Spencer Cox, I think he's very he thinks he's pro LGBTQ plus, but really he's pro TQ plus, because the trans agenda is also inherently homophobic. You see, and the reason is this: people who push the trans agenda are pushing the idea that if you're a specific sex, you're supposed to meet certain stereotypes. If you don't meet those stereotypes, then you must be the opposite gender. And that tends to impact the most people that are gay, because if you know any gay men or women, typically like the gay men will be a little bit more effeminate, and which is obviously fine, no issue. And then the gay women, so they're mixed, but sometimes they tend to be a little bit more masculine, right? So you just, when you get that, and when they're kids, these trans activists will target them and say, okay, well, you're you're a boy who likes pink and you like dolls. So to me, I would say, well, if you're like a young boy, I would just say whatever you're doing, what you want. If you're getting a little bit older, I might think, maybe that kid's gay. Who knows? We'll see what they decide. But for the trans activists, they actually see someone like that and they say, oh, this must be a girl because the boy likes pink and the boy likes dolls. And then they start encouraging that type of behavior. So, they're targeting these kids, and that's where I have real issues, and why I think we need to eradicate the trans agenda from our entire government. And I think part of the reason why we haven't done it is because Cox is actually very sympathetic to it. We have a phone.
Goud, we have Trevor Lee.
Oh, great. Okay, we got Representative Leon. Let me pull up his bill.
Go ahead, Trevor. You're on.
Are you there?
All right. Yep. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Sorry about being so late because I know I was scheduled to call in sooner. Work just kept me back a little bit, and all the amazing festivities today with electing Donald J. Trump as president and now being sworn in. It's amazing.
No, isn't it? I am so happy today. Like, I can't even tell you.
Have you planned your trip to the Gulf of America yet?
Not yet. But I think I may have to make a trip now that we've renamed it. I love it.
Heck yeah.
Did you see? They had a video where it was kind of funny when he was saying it. They showed Hillary Clinton and she just started kind of laughing. But I think it was just like, I love it. But I think for someone like her, she's like, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. Like, and I'm like, nope, it makes sense. Rename it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about HB 77? And this is the flag bill that you're going to run.
Yeah. So that bill that I'm running is something that has been very similar to other bills that have been tried specifically last year, where we're trying to keep politics out of classrooms, K through 12, right? I mean, that's really what we're shooting for. We don't want to have children to worry about, or even parents worrying about teachers or potentially administrators who are trying to push an agenda onto them in any way, shape, or form, whether that's LGBTQ or whether that's MAGA or white supremacy or Nazis or however it is. Politics need to be out of school. I mean, there's a time and a place to learn about stuff, but actually displaying a flag because you're trying to promote or say this is a space for this specific group of people, then that's political and that needs to go. And so my bill is very simple. Unless the flag is clearly defined in the bill, then you're not allowed to display it anywhere on school grounds.
Okay. Last year, I think it was Representative Stenquist tried to run a similar bill, right?
Correct. Very similar, but it got a little bit too complicated.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So why do you think this will succeed where he failed?
Well, mine is a lot more narrow with the scope, right? Like, I'm not talking about stickers or banners. Like, I'm just sticking this to flags. I'm keeping it very basic. American flags, state flags, other countries' flags, POW flags, local university flags. Unless it's specifically defined, you can't display it in the classroom. And I think that's why it got too complicated last year. We're starting to include, in lesson plans, and it was starting to include in just like what actually is a flag and other issues that, in my opinion, kind of started to divert away from just flags. And so this is going to keep the scope very narrow, very specific. And I'm hoping with that, it's not going to do everything, but it's going to be a great stepping stone to start making sure our classrooms are politically neutral.
Okay. There was a section in here where you allow it says you could also fly a flag that is temporarily displayed as part of a school curriculum. And what I'm wondering here is, do you think, my fear is that this could be used to display pride flags in the classroom, that line. Do you have any have you heard any concerns about that? Do you have any concerns about that?
It's interesting. I have heard a little bit on that, but here's what I would say. Why on earth, if they're going to display a pride flag, why on earth is that in the lesson plan? Because it's not. You can't find anywhere in the curriculum, even within our schools, where that's in the lesson plan. So that's where I'm not worried about it, because then they are specifically displaying it for purposes other than classroom teaching, and it's not part of any lesson plan anywhere within our curriculum.
Okay. Do you think that you'll get any Democrat support for this bill?
Probably not.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a rhetorical question.
Yeah. The fundamental difference is that as Republicans, we typically believe that schools should be politically neutral. We actually truly do believe that. But the Democrats will tell you that this, specifically is targeting LGBTQ flags, and that it is not a political symbol, which I completely disagree with them, and so would the vast majority of parents, and also just every average day people here in Utah who if you ask them, is the LGBTQ flag political? And they would say absolutely yes. Just like a MAGA flag is political. Whether we like it or not, those are political flags, and they just have no place in classrooms.
Yeah. And then I think you kind of answered this question, but I was wondering why you didn't just list and say, here are flags that are specifically not allowed in the classroom. And so maybe you could say no pride flags, no MAGA flags, no Nazi flags. Is there a reason why you went with here are the flags that are allowed instead of saying here are the flags that are not allowed?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. The reason we did it that way is because now it's clearly defined what you can fly, instead of potentially a new flag or something popping up and saying, hey, this wasn't on the list of banned flags. I mean, we know how they try to get around it. It's also why in the bill it says you can't use an altered form of a flag unless it's one of the unless it's clearly been defined in the bill. You cannot use that flag, and that'll keep it a lot easier. And it is a lot more narrow to say that here's what you can display versus everything else is not. That just keeps it a lot more clean.
Okay, that's helpful. Are there any other bills that you'll be running this session that you want to highlight?
Yes, I am running a bill, a couple of election bills. One of them is to help with the privacy issues that we've had with not allowing candidates to see those voters that are considered private. I'm going to really once again narrow the scope of this as well, where very few people should actually be private on the voter rolls. I have a way of the bill that I've been working with the clerks to make sure that a lot of information will still be private, but candidates and the party specifically will have access to your information if you're going to affiliate with the party. So, like if you're affiliated with the Republican Party, let's say, then I'm going to make sure that your information has to go to the candidate and specifically the party that you are affiliating with, and that's going to help a lot with all these candidates. I mean, you've run for office, you know how it is when you say, well, here's all the list of voters, but I don't know who 40% of them are because their information is listed as private. Well, that makes running a campaign almost impossible. And so I'm trying to make sure that we can start identifying who. And so it'll have an address, and then it will assign them not their name, but a voter ID to each individual. And that will be given to the candidates. And then the party will have all of their information. So the party will know specifically, and they'll have an understanding of who their members are.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, yeah, because I've heard complaints. I think for the parties though, I've heard that more about the withheld voters and the private ones. There's that distinction, right? Private, and maybe you're hearing something different, but I thought private there is some distribution to parties. Withheld, there's not. Is it both are not being handed over to parties now?
Correct. Well, the lines have been blurred, and you're just getting this massive list of people who are either withheld or private, and you're not getting any of that. And it's a big list. I mean, when you run for office, there is a lot of people that you have no clue who they are, how to get a hold of them, that are part of your party in your party primaries, and it's a big deal. It's a problem for candidates.
Yeah. No, I bet you'll get a lot of support for that from delegates and grassroots people on, at least on the conservative side.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think, one of the keys to that bill too is I've been working with the clerks to make sure that we can, find the right balance between those who actually should be private and, having a voter's privacy still be to a point where it is private to a degree, but you kind of give up some of that privacy when you decide to join a private party, and the party, for at least, should have that information.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have another question for you. I know the legislature is going to tackle, there's quite a few bills to kind of address some aspects of illegal immigration in Utah. And I like some of the bills that I've seen, or at least some of the proposals. The one though that I'm wondering about, do you know, is there any appetite in the legislature to go after some of the big ticket items? So get rid of driver's privileges cards, get rid of in-state tuition at our state universities, or any of these kind of bigger programs, or have you guys already disclosed everything that you're going to run this session?
No, there is an appetite on those issues. I'm not sure if you'll see some of that stuff this session or not. But just keep your eyes peeled. There's some more bills coming as pertains to those, and we'll address those issues. Maybe not in a way that you think we will, but we will address some of those issues this session.
Okay. So for just on HB 77, if people want to support it, what do you think they should do?
Definitely show up in committee, or email or call or text your legislator and tell them to vote for it in favor of that bill. As it becomes closer to when that will be heard, if you want to come testify in favor of that bill, it would be great to have a lot of support there on the day of.
Okay. And I don't think the hearings have been scheduled yet, right?
Not yet, nope. You'll probably see the first week or so, mostly interim bills that have already been through committee, and then you'll see these other ones start popping up as we get more into it.
Okay. Well, I think the session starts tomorrow, right? Are you excited?
Yeah, here we go. This is my third session. Starting to feel more like a seasoned veteran as we go into my third year, so it should be a good session, and I'm excited for it.
Great. All right. Well, thanks a lot for calling in, Representative Lee, and I am sure I will see you soon. We appreciate it.
Sounds good. Good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Thanks. Okay. Well, so there you have it. I think I like his explanation, actually. So, I had that question about this one provision that I think a teacher could use to try to display a pride flag, and it's this one, a flag that is temporarily displayed as part of a school curriculum. But I kind of maybe I like the way he's done this. Then we have a list. Here are the flags that you can display, and if it's not on the list, you can't display it. And that and to his point, that does solve the problem of if they create a new flag, you don't then have to amend the bill. And I can tell you with the pride flags, there are a lot of pride flags. There's I once went to there's the LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce in Utah, and I've gone to that a few times. As you know, I when I ran for office, I went to it, and then also, as I think most of you guys know, I have my own law practice, so I've been to it, and it's a good place to network, right, with other. It's not just gay people; it's a mix of people, And but one time they had an activity where you had to see how many pride flags you could name, and it was this sheet that had like 30 different flags, and needless to say, I was not very good at it. There's a lot of different flags. I remember when I ran for county clerk, I was at the Pride Festival, and I had a booth, and so these kids, they'd walk by with all these different flags, and I remember I started stopping them and just saying, "Hey, what does your flag stand for?" And it was the weirdest stuff. Like, God, there was one where this girl told me her flag meant that I can't remember what it's called, but it's something where you're not physically attracted to somebody until you get to know them. And that's apparently part of the LGBTQIA plus community or whatever. And so I was like, I can't even believe that's a thing. I would just think that's just how you are, right? Like, you're not instantly attracted to someone. You want to get to know them first. That I've never thought of that as being a sexual orientation, so to speak. Anyway, I thought that was kind of weird. So it seems like maybe we'll get those pride flags out of the classroom. I will say, we got our producer back.
Yes, you have another caller, Goud. It's Tracy.
Okay, great. You can patch
There you
through.
go. Tracy, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, Tracy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, so we were talking about the Sundance Film Festival, and I know that you had posted last year.
Hey, before
What?
you talk about that, I knew you were talking about you were just talking about that flag bill, and I had a couple comments on that too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's hear it. What do you got?
So I think your initial instinct about the wording was correct. I think it's actually going to do, if it got passed, to do more harm than what Trevor Lee is intending. I think Trevor Lee has some great intentions behind it, but he's not thinking about the impact it will have on the teacher and the actual conservative teacher, because the historic flag, I know you know about how they passed that new ugly flag. Eventually, the historic flag's not even really listed in there, even if he does talk about it. Even the Gadsden flag would have to be removed according to this language. And what does temporary mean? Like, there's really a lot of holes in this bill. And at what point does the U.S. history class have to decide when it's time to remove the historic flag that they just passed? And is it breaking the law, or like, is the teacher going to be punished? You know, like, it's almost like it's threatening teachers if they are conservative. It's gonna have the opposite of his intention. And I just don't think government should be dictating this kind of stuff. There's a different way about going about it. I understand his intention, but to me, you would attack this in a different avenue, and it would be a sexual avenue. You wouldn't go after the actual flag. You'd go after what is LGBTQ, as well as it's saying your sexual preference. Why is that allowed in schools? Why do we have to talk about sexual preference? I would attack it that way instead of at actual objects, because then you're going to end up hurting the conservative teacher. And I really do understand his intent behind the bill, but it's going to end up doing more damage than and hurting him more than what he will even get from it, because you can still get in the temporary gay flag, and it hurts. Like, I have a friend who they make flags, like they say, make your family flag, like your family crest, your family banner. And so she wouldn't even be able to display those flags according to this bill. Like, she could be scared to, because it's telling her she's going to get fined or in trouble if she puts those flags up. So she can't even display her students' artworks according to this flag, or according to this bill.
Well, I think there's a, well, yeah, I guess these are things to maybe think about. Because I think the restriction is on teachers, right? So um, I thought there's a provision in here that students can still, like a student could still have a pride flag if they wanted. It's the restriction is on the teacher and the school. So I would think the artwork piece would be okay.
Now, according to this, okay,
Okay.
it's
Well,
it's just I just wanted to warn, like, I don't think it's a very good bill. I think I understand his intentions, and I think he has very good intentions, but it's going to end up backfiring.
Yeah, no, this is the type of comment that's worth either emailing or also going and giving testimony about, because they do. I think typically, like, your bill sponsors will listen when people are testifying and offering criticisms or improvements to the bill, right? Because I think when we're doing it, we're actually trying to improve his bill so that it's successful. Because I want to see him succeed on this. There's never a reason to really have a pride flag in a classroom.
Right.
And we all know it'll be a trans flag. So, like,
exactly.
okay. Let me pull up your tweet that you did about the Sundance Film Festival.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so you had done this tweet last year, right? Yeah, about the types of movies that are being shown at the Sundance Film Festival. And then I think you saw that the other day they had their training over the weekend for volunteers for this year's film festival, and they were giving out pronoun pins to the volunteers. Someone who was there for the training sent it to me. Dude, check this out. They're like giving out pronoun pins. I heard most of the volunteers did not take them, but at the same time, like, we funded that now, right?
Yeah, we've been funding that for years. We have been funding this Sundance festival for years, and now we've got an ongoing funding source of $1.8 million. So those are some pretty expensive buttons that we paid for.
Right. Do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, maybe, like, do you think we should keep funding it, or is it time to shut this down?
It is actually the most unconstitutional thing ever, is to force somebody to donate to a company or a business that they do not align with. I mean, it is bringing in and attracting people that want to watch porn. And I don't know if you saw my other tweet. I retweeted yours and said, you know, they've been out advertising when those bathroom bills went through. They started messaging their people, their tourists, the people that come here, and saying, don't worry, this bill does not apply to you. You can still use the opposite sex bathroom. You're fine. It does not apply to you. So it's almost like, you know, come here, predators. And I'm not talking about the actual person that's having gender dysphoria. I'm talking about the people that want to pretend they do, so they can be a predator to your child or to your you know, go in there and harm your children. This administration has done nothing but bring dangers to Utah. I mean, between the immigration policies and the funding policies of how they spend our tax dollars, it's embarrassing. And I cannot believe that this is Utah and that we have an administration that does this. I mean, it's Governor Cox's brother-in-law that's the one that's funding this porn festival, is what it is. I mean, it's disgusting. I was looking through some of their festival movies that are going on right now, and one said it's called The Eating of an Orange, and it's the sexuality to explore through slugs and rituals of eating an orange. There's Hold Me Close, that's about two queer Black men or Black women who experience cycles of life's joys and pains. The Virgin of Quarry Lake, and the other ones were, I mean, it's full on porn. Like they ejaculate in these movies and in these.
Oh my God.
I'm telling you, it is disgusting. And our tax dollars pay for that, for a very dominant Mormon culture. I bet if anybody of those really knew what was going on at this Sundance Festival, they would be horrified. And to know that it is bringing in predators into their state around their family, they would have a come apart. And we're paying $1.8 million to them every year. It blows my mind.
Yeah, actually, I think that this year, I'll see if I can find it here, that Spencer Cox actually just, so, you know, this pronoun pin thing happened this weekend. And then I saw that Governor Cox actually said he wants $3 million in the budget this year for Sundance.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah, so he actually wants to increase it. And so that, I guess, and I have it pulled up. It's from KUER, which is crazy to me because, I mean, now you've just named 3 things that they're doing to undermine Utah's culture and even our laws, right? So the HB 257 issue where they're encouraging people to go or saying they can go in the opposite sex bathrooms. I'll just note one thing on what you're saying, though, is that while it may be true that some people with gender dysphoria they may not be the biggest threat, a lot of men who transition actually have autogynephilia, which is a sexual fetish. And that's where you get turned on when people treat you like a woman, like sexually aroused. And so I would say I wouldn't want people like that going into the women's bathroom. I think that's weird.
Yeah.
The other piece, yeah. So like if you're in the women's bathroom and one of them comes in and you start talking to them like they're a woman, you're participating in their fetish.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the types of movies that they're showing, right? And then also this promotion of the trans agenda, which we're trying to stop. We're sitting here working to eradicate the trans agenda from our government, and then our government is inviting organizations in that are promoting it, and then paying them so they can have their festivals here. I have real problems with this, and I don't know do you have any suggestions on how you think we should try to tackle it?
Well, I think we tackle it at a constitutional way and sue the government for the 14th Amendment. I didn't say I wanted to donate to the trans agenda or some kind of inviting tourism for porn. I didn't agree to that, and there's no way that you can actually do a referendum anymore. They've subverted the process so much, so there's no regress. They don't give me a chance to say, hey, I don't want that. I mean, they proved that with the flag when they changed our state flag. You want us to gather 140,000 signatures in a referendum within 30 days? Are you kidding me? That's not normal for an everyday person. That's a company that actually is a company that gathers signatures, not the everyday grassroots that just tries to watch them destroy and stop them from passing these bills that are destroying our state. They're to a point that they don't listen anymore. They just ignore you because they know you cannot do a referendum. They'll subvert your vote because they've allowed signature gathering, or they forced the law doesn't provide it, where they lie to you and tell you the law says that they can gather signatures, and so you can't get them at the election box. You can't get rid of them because they have put it so hard to even do a referendum or get them out. So honestly, the 14th Amendment sounds good to me, and I think we should just sue the crap out of them and tell them, fine, you're going to take my rights away, pay me.
Okay, well that's one option. The other one I keep thinking is, you know, when they released that continuing resolution this year, I heard a bunch of people took it and then put it into AI, and then the AI spit back out all the problems with it. And I wonder if we start doing that with the budget, and then maybe people show up and start actually testifying against specific line items, right? Like this one strikes me as is I would think would be able to defeat it because number one, like I said, I think once you start talking about the content of the movies, most people aren't going to want those movies here anyway, or at least not taxpayers paying for it. I mean, if they want to have their festival, as far as I know, I'm assuming it's mostly rich white leftists that show up at this festival anyway. They can go to the festival they have the money. They can go pay for the festival, right? I don't know why taxpayers need to do it.
Can I toss something in here, Mr. Producer here? Originally, when the festival came up, it was a good idea for the state to promote it. It's had so much promotion, the state no longer needs to do that. They make, just like you said, Goud, they make tons of money. Just a rental, a room rental in Park City or Heber is $1,000 a night for people to come and go to the festival. They don't need our support anymore.
You're right. And all it is a way for them to money launder. So Governor Cox, he gives them a bunch of free money, and then they circle around and fund his campaign in a different way. It's like it's money laundering. That's all it is. We don't need to.
You mean corruption
anymore?
Corruption in the state of Utah? No.
Yeah. A RICO case.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great point. That, I mean, generally, I think when money is going to these types of organizations, there's a aspect of it that is definitely money laundering. I'll give you this, and then you give me a donation in return. And no one says it. They're not stupid, but you know that's the understanding.
Yeah, and then they pay themselves out of their campaign fund. So it's...
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for calling in on this item. And any other thoughts on Sundance? Will you be attending? What movie are you going to watch this year, Tracy?
No, I don't. I don't have any desire to attend that thing. And for people that didn't know, I didn't know either. What is horrible is once you start paying attention to what the government is doing, you see horrible things all over, and then you can never look away. Oh, for those that did not know that Sundance had porn in it, I'm sorry.
Well, they probably just thought it was boring, artsy movies that nobody wants to watch. Now you just made it. Maybe they'll actually get more people to show up. All right. Well, thanks for calling in.
Yep,
we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, so I do think this is something that if you're like an average taxpayer, it is time to shut off funding for this festival, right? It's a little bit ridiculous that we're paying for it again when they're doing things that are directly contrary to Utah's values. So, like I said, they're promoting the trans agenda. That is my personal bugaboo that I do not like, and I think we need to end it. Like Tracy said, they're showing sexually explicit movies in movie theaters, and then and then also telling people they can use the opposite sex bathrooms, which means actually we probably need to go and fix HB 257 so that we stop that problem. But until then, it would be nice if organizations were not encouraging people to do that. Mr. Producer, do you have
got something? Another call? Hang on just a second. It looks like Olivia Dawn is here. Hold on. Let me get her in.
Ha.
Olivia,
Yes, this is me.
are you there? You're on with Goud.
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Okay. Hey, welcome. I'm good. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to? So just for people who don't know, I know Olivia. We serve on the state central committee together, and she was actually the former secretary of the state party. So someone I think that probably most Republicans in Utah know on some level. Do you want to go ahead and talk about what happened with how your interactions with the DCFS? How did this start, and what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in January of last year, 2024, my daughter, it was the day before she turned 1 year old, we ended up going to the hospital because she experienced a seizure that lasted about 15 minutes.
Can you tell us what? Sorry to interrupt. Can you tell our listeners what DCFS is?
It's the Department of Child and Family Services.
Yeah. Just so people know, I've talked about this before, but they fall under the Department of Health and Human Services, and they've had a lot of failures happen over the past maybe year or so, at least prominent failures. One of the examples is the case of Gavin Peterson. He was a child who was starved to death by his family over months. And even though multiple people called DCFS, so including like school employees up in Weber County and various people, DCFS did not save that kid from being starved to death and tortured by his family. I think it was both of his parents and one of his siblings. So this is an agency that has serious issues. Governor Cox has not done anything to try to reform it. He hasn't changed the leadership at either DCFS or the agency above it, which is the Department of Health and Human Services. That's run by Tracy Gruber. She's a left-wing loony from Chicago. She makes like $333,000 a year, and she's a complete and utter failure. And he could easily cut her from his administration. He hasn't done it. But what I invited Olivia on because she's had an experience as somebody who does not what happened to her should not have happened. That's the point, and it's going to show you that DCFS is completely misusing their resources and focusing on the wrong things. Okay, there you go, Olivia. Continue. I hope that helps.
I couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly the problem here. So like I said, my daughter, we ended up taking her to the hospital. Unprompted with no issues other than just her having this seizure. We took her to the hospital. As good parents should, when your child is having some sort of health emergency and you don't know how to take care of it yourself, you should absolutely reach out for help, and that's what we did. We discovered through all the different things that happened while we were in the hospital that it was simply a febrile seizure. But they did everything they could to make sure and rule out everything else. My daughter turned 1 year old while we were in the hospital. We initially went into the local ER. They transferred us to primary children's. While we were in the hospital, we said yes to every single one of their tests, including a spinal tap, a lumbar puncture, multiple blood draws, an attempted catheterization of a baby, and it did not work. So then they tried to put on a U-bag. That didn't work either. They could not collect urine. They did an EEG where they scrubbed her head with a sugar scrub, put sticky electrodes all over, and then had to monitor her for a period of time. She was exhausted. I mean, the night before, she had not been feeling well. She'd thrown up and was awake up off and on all night long. And then during the day, she seemed that she was fine, and it was that evening that we took her to the hospital. So all of this happened, and we said yes to everything up until the doctors said that they wanted to do an MRI. And my mama gut said no. At first we were like, yes, we said yes to every single thing. And And then when we asked a few more questions about how they would conduct that MRI, and they said that they would have to sedate her. And this is my little teeny tiny baby. She was born 4 pounds, 10 ounces. At 1 year, she had tripled her size. But if you're born 4 pounds, being tripled still is tiny. And she was about that, between that 12 and 13 pounds at a year. And so she was very little, but she was where she should have been for where she was born. And we had a lot of people who helped us make sure that she was on the growth chart where she should be. But she was tiny. And my mama gut said, no, do not let them sedate your baby. And so I consulted with my husband, who was there with me at the hospital, and we said no. That was the only thing that they suggested that we said no to. And while there was a few questions about why we were saying no to it, there was no urgency expressed to us by doctors or nurses or anyone that it had to be done, that if we didn't do an MRI, we would be missing out on vital information that would tell us whether or not our child was well or not. And we were discharged from primary children's in less than 24 hours from being originally admitted to the ER. It was a day later that DCFS went and knocked on my mom's home, knocked on the door at my mom's home. The reason they went there is because we live in an apartment complex and we just don't receive mail here. We've had bad experiences receiving mail in, this temporary type housing scenario. So we get all of our important stuff shipped to my mom's house. And so that's where the address that had been put on file, and that's where they went and knocked on the door. They obviously didn't meet us, and so 2 days after that, I got a phone call, which was when I was clued into the fact that DCFS had been called on our family. I wasn't able to talk with her at that point. We scheduled for a later time, and by scheduled, I mean she said she'd call back a week later, and it was more than a week later that she called me back. It was not on the schedule, and again, when she called, I was not in a position to really talk to her for a long time, but it's DCFS, and I didn't particularly want them in my life, so I tried to be as amenable as I could while also figuring out how on earth to get them out of my life as quickly as possible. And I said as much to her on the phone. She said that she wanted to make sure we were doing follow-up doctor's appointments, none of which were required or even stressed very, very strongly while we were at the hospital. They wanted in several months after we were at the hospital, they had suggested that we come back in to have Molly just monitored to see if she was progressing or if there had been a delay in her abilities because of how long that seizure had lasted. But they said unless she had another seizure, there was no reason to have the MRI. And really that was just their recommendation, was to have her monitored months down the road. And I told this to the DCFS agent, but she said, and I said, I need to have a list of everything that you need from me so that we can get DCFS out of our lives as quickly as possible. She, on this call, told me that if I refused to give her access to my daughter's medical records, that as a government agency, she would be able to gain access to them without my permission. I told her that I was shocked by that. It's not something that I completely was unprepared to hear, but at the same time, for her to so blatantly tell me that my rights as a mother protecting my child and her private medical records was completely disregarded. She was flippant in the fact that she could gain access whether or not I said yes. With no cause, by the way. She had not presented to me any reason for her to even be in our life. She didn't tell me why she was calling us. She didn't tell me why we were being investigated. She said she'd provide me with a list of things they needed, but I never got that list. So they never got the information they wanted, because I didn't even know what they wanted, other than that they wanted me to go and do this follow-up appointment that was months down the road. And I didn't say no to that. My husband and I ended up traveling out of the country with our daughter a couple of weeks after this hospitalization. And we were out of the country for almost a month. During that time, DCFS claims to have called us, but we do not have phone records that indicate that happened. My phone was stolen, so there is a small chance that maybe they called during the period that my phone was missing. However, I still do have an ability to check voicemails that were left during that period, and there was not a voicemail from DCFS, even though she claimed to have left one. So, and a lot of this came out because we ended up being taken to court a few months later. The DCFS, she was actually a CPS agent, which is a sub-department of DCFS, CPS being Child Protective Services. And as it's been explained to me, they are the quote-unquote investigative side of DCFS. So there's the Department of Child and Family Services that helps if children have to be removed from homes, placing them into foster care. If they need to have people coming into your home to observe you as a parent with your children, then that's all DCFS. But CPS is kind of this arm that goes in and is supposed to supposedly investigate these claims to figure out whether or not they are valid claims. So this particular worker claims to have called us twice in February, but we were out of the country and have no record of those phone calls. Then she says that she called the beginning of March, but I have my phone and so did my husband, and neither one of us have those records. There is, however, a record of her texting me at the end of March saying that she was going to escalate our case to the court because we were failing to provide the information that she needed. Again, I had asked for a list of the things that I needed to provide to her, and she never gave me that list. So I wasn't able to provide her anything. And it was, excuse me, it was like the first week in April, maybe like the 8th or 9th of April, that we got a summons to appear in court on a Friday night at 9 p.m., delivered at my mom's address in unsealed envelopes that anyone could have received. They did not confirm whether we lived at that home or not. All they did was ask if the person who received them was above the age of 18. They did not even know whether he was related to me or not. This paperwork could have been delivered to a complete stranger's home, unsealed, with no verification that we lived there at all. So there's a problem right there with the process of delivery. I understand that you might need to show up at someone's home in the middle of the night to make sure that you catch them at home and you deliver it appropriately. But it needs to be in a sealed envelope. You need to confirm that it is the person you're delivering to, and that's just in and of itself a problem. But there's multiple of those. Because it was a Friday night and we were supposed to show up in court Thursday morning of the following week, we had a very limited time to be able to find any kind of help. And I do believe that this is intentional. I think this is something that DCFS does often because they want to catch families off their guard. They want to make sure that parents are not in a position to protect themselves. I mean, I have spoken to multiple parents since this situation has happened to us that have said that the same thing happened to them, where they were given a very small window of time. It was less than a week, and it was delivered on a weekend, where you can't call any attorneys, you can't call any doctors, you can't call anyone who might help in verify that you are a good parent or just not to incriminate yourself, which is your right. And so then parents show up with a court-appointed attorney who doesn't know your case, who doesn't know you, who's just going to essentially work with the state to make sure that the state gets what they want. And that is not to disparage attorneys. There's a lot of court-appointed attorneys who I'm sure do great things. But when they do not know you and they do not know your case, there's not a lot that they can do to help you in a very short period of time. So a lot of parents are harmed because of that system. I mean, thank God, and I truly mean that, thank God that we were surrounded by people who were able to help us. Because I have served in the positions that I have within the Republican Party, and because of who my mother is, and because of who my mother-in-law is, as well as other family and friends, we were able to reach out to multiple attorneys who could then point us in the right direction, give us good recommendations. And I was frantically calling all day Monday, even Sunday evening, texting and reaching out to people saying, hey, can I call your office on Monday? Are you free? I need help. We reached out to a doctor friend who was able to fit us into his schedule quickly. to look at my child and say, I will give you a clean bill of health. And he did that looking at her, not just, willing to give me whatever I was asking for. He would not have signed his name to something that was not completely true. So he looked at my daughter and was able to verify that she was healthy and that she was good and we were not causing harm to our child. But this paperwork that was summoning us to court was alleging that we were neglectful and abusive parents.
Okay.
We ended up discovering that a family member, an extended family member, had called and reported us to DCFS. In the court process, we discovered that this CPS agent, who had been claiming to have called us when she did not, who was definitely not following the guidelines, who did not provide me with a list of things that she needed and all these other things. I mean, there's a multitude of things that this particular agent did not do correctly. One of them was that she was at Primary Children's while we were there and came into our hospital room without disclosing who she was, dressed in full PPE, including a hospital gown, a hat, a mask, and gloves, with her name tag covered, did not introduce herself, and claims to have been able to see and assess our child without us being aware of who she was. We learned.
Yeah, I think when you and I had spoken before, you said that under the CPS or DCFS rules, they're supposed to disclose their identity and have their name tag showing when they approach you, right?
Yes, if they come up to you in a park or any public situation, or they come and they knock on your door, they are supposed to have their name tag in front of them. They are supposed to immediately introduce themselves by name and by the organization that they are with. So if there was CPS, DCFS, or some other situation, they are supposed to disclose who they are and what their name is. And she did not do that. One of the reasons that this happened was because the doctors and nurses at Primary Children's did not want us to think that they had called her. So they wanted her to see us without telling us who she was, violating DCFS policy so that the hospital didn't look bad. What this ends up doing is we trust the hospital even less. The hospital looks even worse because they wanted someone to lie. The government agencies looks bad because they complied with this attempted coercion, and it's a clear effort to be dishonest and hide who they were. She called her boss to verify that she should do that. So it happened, the doctors and nurses telling her that she shouldn't say who she was, her boss telling her that she shouldn't say who she was, and then her eventually complying and putting on all the PPE and coming into our hospital room and being introduced to us by the nurse that was coming in as a training nurse. My husband asked who she was because she was someone we'd never met before, and the social worker nurse that was helping us with scheduling said, "Oh, she's just a nurse in training."
Oh, wow. Hey, just one second.
Represented in every.
I just want to say, if you're listening right now and you want to call in with any questions, feel free to call in. It's 385-899-2134. Olivia, can you tell us what happened in the case itself? What was the resolution and the outcome?
Absolutely. So we went in, and I was about to have a second baby. So thank goodness we were able to find an attorney who actually was willing to take our case. We had to pay the financial fees. We had to pay the medical bills. So we are definitely hurting financially, but we were able to save our children, was the positive resolution there. The paperwork, when we were summoned to court, said, "We're not attempting to take your children right now, but just know that could happen when you come to court. It could happen that we will take your child from you and any other children who might be in the home." So that's not what they were attempting to do, but it's listed among the things that were the options to have happened to us. So we were definitely going into court scared that we might lose our kids. And when DCFS is involved, that's always a possibility, even if it's not what they are claiming to want in that moment. We originally signed up for 3 days of court. It was postponed about a month so that I could give birth and recover and be well. And then we came to court, I think it was 5 weeks later. And we were supposed to have mediation where DCFS wanted us to accept guilt, but they wouldn't mark it out as a public acceptance of guilt. It was only internally, which would not affect us in anything public facing, but it would stop us from being able to foster or adopt children. And in their system, it would show that we were abusive and neglectful parents. And my husband and I both said, absolutely not. We are not. And there is no way on earth we will allow for someone to coerce us into saying we are when we're not. So it went to trial a month later. And it was supposed to be a 3-day trial, a day and a half for the state, a day and a half for us. The state called every single doctor and nurse that we interacted with at the emergency room and primary children's to come and testify. They also had a nurse who we never interacted with, but stamped a letter that was sent to our home. But she then testified that that letter was returned to sender and was never delivered. So I don't know why they wanted her testimony. It was just a waste of time. Every single one of these doctors and nurses had to be paid for their time. So it's just state spending up the wazoo to make sure that they were all able to come as expert witnesses and testify. Like I said, the state was originally supposed to take a day and a half. They ended up taking 6 days. We had to keep extending and adding time because they needed to get through all of their witnesses. They even called our personal doctor as their witness, attempting to make him agree with them instead of us. And the way that they did that whole witness prep in advance was very, in my opinion, very dirty. They tried to manipulate him to get us to agree to a settlement because this was a, quote, very expensive case and they shouldn't be taking it to trial. That's what they told him, who then told me. Because he's my doctor and we're friendly and familiar and he was honest with me. So there was multiple efforts to try and get us to step down. Because it was 6 days of trial, that meant we had to pay for 6 days of attorney's fees. Our attorney was phenomenal, but she couldn't work for free, so they were trying to wring us dry, which is what they will do with any parent who actually is able to receive help in this kind of a scenario. It's terrifying. But after 6 days of the state putting forth all of this quote-unquote evidence, never being quite clear on what it was they were even trying to prove at all. At first, it seemed like they wanted us to get this MRI, and their end result goal was to have us agree to an MRI. But then, as our doctor was able to say that our daughter was clearly progressing, had no developmental delays, and was showing where she should be for her age, there was no need for the MRI. They then changed course and tried to show that we were neglectful parents because we decided to use alternative forms of medical supervision than having our regular doctor checkups. We didn't have a regular pediatrician. We used at-home supervision. We had a lot of advice from family and friends that were in all forms of medicine, holistic and part of the medical system. And that is what we used to monitor our child instead of doing it the way that they thought we should. And so then they tried to say that we were being neglectful because of that. Their case went all over the place. It was never clear what their end goal was. And on day 7 of court, the state had rested and our attorney decided to make a motion to dismiss. It's a specific type of motion. I can't remember what it's called exactly. But essentially saying, Judge, please dismiss this case before we even have to present our side. The state has failed to in any way indicate what their goal is with this case. And that all kind of happens before court where they send these written motions back and forth, and then you come to court and you argue these motions, and then the judge makes a decision. And when the state rested their arguments and we weren't going to do any back and forth, I'm sitting there frantically writing a note to my attorney. My husband and I totally thought that the judge was going to say, okay, it's lunchtime, everyone break, and we'll come back. And the judge, as I'm sitting there frantically writing, he says, well, I'm going to dismiss this case. I'm going to vacate all future dates, which we had 3 more dates on the calendar so that we could present our case. And he vacated all the dates. He says, I'm going to get you a written decision, and this case is over. And my husband and I were shocked because we didn't think he would do that. But he very clearly understood that there was nothing that the state had shown that warranted what we had just gone through, this hell that we had experienced. The guardian ad litem in our case even spoke in favor of our motion to dismiss, saying, look, I might not have made the decisions that this couple did, but the thing that they are supposed to do is show that these parents were made reasonable and informed decisions. That if they said no to the MRI, was that reasonable and informed? If they did not go to all of these well child checks, were they reasonable, informed in making a different decision? They have proven, my husband and I both were called to the stand as witnesses for this case. And we both were able to testify that we as parents know what we're doing, that we have put in the effort, that we've done the research, that we are reasonable and informed. And the guardian ad litem agreed that this was a ridiculous case.
Wait, so you guys didn't testify?
Oh, we did testify. Both of us did. My
You
husband
did? Okay.
had a half day of testifying, and I was on the stand for a full 8-hour day.
Wow. Okay. Let me just go back to one other piece of this, because I thought it was interesting. We talked about it. When there was a continuation of the hearing date because you were pregnant at the time, so you could go have the baby and then come back to this. Did DCFS object to that, or were they fine with it?
They did not object, with the caveat that we needed to allow for a DCFS worker to enter our home during the duration between that point and when the decision of the court was reached. So for 4 months, okay, I had DCFS in my home twice a month. That first time was I think it was every week through April, and then it was twice in May, twice in June, twice in July, twice in August.
Okay.
So we had to allow
wow.
to be in our home. This was an invasion of privacy.
Yeah. So ultimately, though, they don't meet their burden, right? They have the burden to show that you guys are violating whatever standard they say you're violating. They're not even able to meet it after they present their case. The case gets dismissed, and then that's it. You're back to square one, right?
Yes.
Except now I'm thinking about it. Now you have a bunch of attorney's fees that you've had to pay for.
Exactly. The judge ended up taking 56 days to write his decision, and his decision was brilliant. He identified multiple times where the CPS worker had not operated according to policies. He said that it was very clear that the doctors and nurses who came and testified did not even remember who our child was, especially once they were done testifying. They were then asked to identify her in a picture, and all of them seemed surprised that we had pictures that indicated she was able to do things that they claimed she couldn't. Like the nurse said she couldn't sit up or hold things in front of her. And we have pictures of her doing both of those things in the hospital. So it's just ridiculous things like that. But yeah, now we're in a position where we need to have DCFS remove our names from their system, because right now we're still in their system as having been brought forward on these claims. Even though it was dismissed, we're still in their system until we can file some sort of motion to have our names removed, which is going to cost us more in attorney's fees. And really, at this point, with attorney's fees and medical bills, we're at about $80,000 in the hole. And, we have thankfully received some donations to help with that. We are still very much hurting financially because of everything. But because of the donations that we've received from friends and family, we've been able to at least stay afloat. Those donations have helped us pay our attorneys so we could then afford to pay rent. We've been able to pay a medical bill that allowed for us to then continue to have groceries and, but it's been very, very hard. And the thing that scares me the most about this experience is that it can happen to anyone. And I know that we are so blessed that we have the connections that we do that allowed for us to, one, find an amazing attorney in that limited amount of time we were given, but then two, also receive some financial help to be able to keep us afloat during it all. And there are so many other families who would go through this and not have that kind of support. And it's terrifying because that story you just shared of Gavin, who starved to death, and he had multiple reports put out for him. People reaching out saying, this child is not safe. And all they did was go and knock on the door. And when there was no answer, they decided not to go back. That same scenario is true of those poor Frankie kids in the Ruby Frankie case that happened, I think that was last year, maybe 2 years ago now. Those poor kids that were found emaciated and harmed, having been tied up and I mean, horrifically abused. And their oldest sister, who was an adult not living in the home, found out because neighbors called her that they were alone at home for multiple days at a time. And the oldest sister called and said, I lived in that home. That home is an abusive place. These children are alone. Someone go check on them. And all that happened was someone knocked on the door, and when they did not get an answer at the door, they did not pursue it further. In my case, one person filed a complaint. That complaint was not substantiated by anything in medical records or anything of that nature, but still, this one CPS agent decided that it was her responsibility to take us to court and to try and rescue this child that was in no need of saving. I understand maybe following up on a complaint, but there has got to be a way that we are able to determine what complaints are actually worth pursuing. If you need to see my child and make sure she's okay, fine. But why not also insist on seeing Gavin or on seeing those two tiny children who were so mutilated? Why are we not seeing children in real plight?
Yeah, it's worse than what I think people realize. Tracy Gruber, the head of DHHS, and then the head of the DCFS, which is under her, testified before the legislature over the last summer, and it was about the Gavin Peterson case. And I listened to it, and I was shocked because the legislators, a lot of them were talking about what a good job DCFS does. And when when there are deaths that happen on their watch, like what happened with Gavin Peterson, they have all these systems in place to do investigations, but all of it seemed aimed at not actually being accountable for your failures. That's all I heard when I listened to that hearing, is I was like, wow, so this is so convoluted. There's so much bureaucracy, and literally at the end of the day, you haven't fixed the problem that caused you to fail on the Gavin Peterson case. And I assume that with your case, where this just sounds abusive, what happened, abusive in a different way, and that it's abusive toward the parent, causing you guys all these attorney's fees. I don't know what the solution is here, because I don't think internally that organization will do anything to right the ship. It's going to have to come from the legislature. I
completely agree with you. I think one of the things that I really want to see happen at the legislative level is have some sort of limit to their ability to gain access to medical records. I think medical records in the case of a child being abused are profoundly important. And I don't want to stop that from happening when it's needed. But with regards to our case, right, this DCFS worker, the CPS agent, after talking to me one time, decided to reach out to the hospital and ask for medical records without ever having gotten back to me as to what she needed and why they were looking into it. If she had done that and I still said no, then fine, maybe there is a reason for that. But I need to make sure that those medical records, they are protected. There is a reason why HIPAA exists. Medical records are private, and they should not just be accessible willy-nilly. There needs to be some evidence of actual harm before those types of things are made available. I also think that there is too much protection for anonymous reporters. And I know that there's this fear that if people cannot remain anonymous, they won't report things. But here's the problem. People can report anonymously, and there is no repercussion if they're lying. This particular person that filed a complaint against us was a family member, and she called and complained and reported us without evidence and had done it without ever reaching out to us or asking for anything. And when we go to court, we, under the Constitution, have a right to due process and the right to face our accuser. And because she is protected with anonymity, the only reason we know who she is because we were able to see the DCFS report and deduce it. And then we confronted her complaint. But
well, I assume that you're not talking to her much anymore.
No, this particular person is not because we cannot feel safe with this person anymore. And it's hurtful because this is someone that we have loved and someone who we believe loved our children. But if we cannot feel safe, then we cannot be with this person. And there needs to not be this a comfort in knowing that you can anonymously report. There are numerous cases of an ex-spouse reporting their ex because they want to have full custody of their kids. And then, my cousin, for example, has gone through a divorce, and his ex-wife decided to say that he was being abusive to their children and that his home was not safe for his children to live in. And he had to then go through the process of proving that his home was safe and clean and he was responsible so that it did not affect his ability to be parent. That's my cousin. That's someone I personally know that his ex-wife decided to just report. My mother-in-law, it wasn't her ex-husband, it was her ex-husband's sister that reported them to try and make it so that there was harm caused to the family so that these children could not remain with their mother. It happens over and over and over again. These anonymous reports need to go away because then people will actually report if it's real. And just like you do in a car accident, when you call and you're like, yes, I will absolutely be a witness to watching a reckless driver or something of that nature. If you are going to call and report someone to DCFS, then you need to be willing to put your name to it and come into court and testify as to why you reported that. That needs to happen. Otherwise, there should not be these types of reports being put forward.
Well, I think that's a fair point. Hey, so we're kind of at time. I know you had said that people are able to support you guys and help you with your attorney's fees and stuff. Is there a place that they can go to find you for that?
Oh, that would be amazing. We have been utilizing gidsendgo.com/money for Molly. I like the alliterism. I don't particularly love the wording of it, but that was the easiest thing I could come up with a fried pregnant brain. But yeah, gidsendgo.com/money for Molly.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I hope you'll come back again sometime. So
I would love to. Thank you for having me, Goud. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks, Olivia. Okay. Well, that is quite the story. I hope that people can see maybe the problems with our department, our division of Child and Family Services, and how it really needs to be reformed. Now, I'll just say, I think the quickest way to do the reform is to replace the leadership. And specifically, I would start at the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the parent organization of DCFS. Tracy Gruber is leading that department. It is Utah's largest department. She is a leftist from Chicago. I am also from Chicago, the area, but I'm a conservative. And she's just she's a lawyer. She's getting paid $333,000 a year to do that job, and she is bad at it. And so it's really time for her to go and for Governor Cox to replace her. She is part of his cabinet. And for all of you out there that he told he's a different man now, and he's seen the light, and he's no longer essentially a Democrat pretending to be a Republican. He's actually a Republican. The easiest way he could show that is by making some personnel changes. And that is the one that should be made, because she's already caused and is, I would say, responsible for Gavin Peterson's death due to her bad leadership. So this is an issue we should watch. If people are interested in it, you can reach out. And also, I'd watch the legislature to see if anything pops up on that front that will lead to some reforms. Before we close out here, I just wanted to show you guys one thing. I've been looking through all the different bills that have been proposed, and here's one that caught my eye. This is SB 114, and it's about veteran access to state parks. So as some of you probably know, I am a veteran, and so this interested me because last year, the Utah offered free passes to state parks, or free admission to state parks to veterans, that are residents of Utah. So it's a very limited benefit. And I think I actually went to a state park, and it was kind of nice, right? Like, that's a nice thank you. And I'll just add that the federal government actually gives out free passes to national parks for veterans, which I also think is a nice benefit. This year, they're changing. So that was a one-year program, I guess. And this year, they're actually going to change it. So it's only a 25% discount. And I just think this should be a free pass. And here's the thing. Like, we have all this money that they're constantly giving away, right? They gave $1 billion to Gail Miller for her baseball stadium, $1 billion to Ryan Smith for his hockey stadium, $1 billion for that gondola so people can go access ski resorts owned by billionaires. And then, like we just talked about, $1.8 million for the Sundance Film Festival, which is basically, a film festival for a bunch of rich white liberals. That's what it is. I mean, I'm middle class. I don't know anyone that goes to that thing, and or would want to. That's the point. But we can't. According to this, they're appropriating $300,000 for this. Really, we can't spend a little bit more money and just make it free. So let's say it costs, that $300,000 gets you 25% discount. Multiply it times 4, you get $1.2 million. We don't have $1.2 million to give veterans free passes to our state parks. I just think this bill needs to be amended. I appreciate, Karen Kwan is a Democrat, and typically she's wrong on everything. But she's right. I like where this is. Meaning she's not right. The bill needs to be amended. I appreciate the effort here, but it should be free. And I'll just add, Utah actually has a lot of great benefits for veterans. So, for example, I think if you are in the Guard, and I think if you're a veteran too, you get in-state tuition at our state universities. And I believe I was talking to Jordan Tusher at the Utah Parents United Tour last week, and he said he's having a bill this session that will clarify those rules and make it clear that all veterans get that benefit. They also have scholarship programs. I know I've deployed a couple times, and so I could, for example, go to the University of Utah and get an MBA for practically free. And so those are great things, but not everybody uses those. A state park pass is actually more useful to most veterans. And so I would just say, let's make this free. This is actually a good program, and it encourages people to go to state parks, get outside, get some fresh air, right? And we have good state parks, so that would be my one thing here. And I plan on emailing Senator Kwan and Representative Gwynn, who I don't know if he's a Democrat or a Republican. I'm assuming he's a Democrat, though. It's unclear to me because in Utah there are very few straight white males that are Democrats. So it's a little unclear what's going on here. Okay, well, I think that puts us just about at time. I will say I wanted to talk about, maybe I'll talk about this next week, but do you have a call or something?
No, I was just going to tell you, you have 3 minutes left.
No, okay. I was just going to talk about what I don't have time to finish what I want to talk about, so I'm going to give a preview of something I'll talk about next week that I think people will hopefully find interesting.
All right. Well, you finished your show. It was a great show. I'm going to go have some food.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll finish it up then. Thanks. Okay. So what I was going to say is next week, I was going to talk about it this week. We ran out of time. And next week, I would like to talk about a case that Amy Winder-Newton brought Sylvia Miera Fisk into. And Sylvia, if you're a Republican, you probably know who she is. She's someone that's been very active in the Republican Party. She ran for governor this year, lost a convention, but in that process, Amy actually filed a third-party complaint and brought her into a lawsuit that was filed, a lawsuit that really Sylvia had nothing to do with. Just going a little further back, there were Amy accused Dave Robinson, this gay man, of harassment after the 2020 election. In response, he filed a defamation claim, and defamation, conspiracy, false light, and then intentional infliction of emotional distress claim against her, and then a bunch of other people. Well, last year, or actually it's not last year, in 2023, so I think November 2023, she filed a third-party complaint and brought Sylvia into that lawsuit. In response, Sylvia filed what's called a UPEPA motion. It's the Uniform Public Expression Protection Act. And this is something that is meant to protect individuals. So when somebody files a lawsuit against you because you have utilized your right to free expression, you're a member of the press, and they file it against you for exercising those rights, you can respond with what's called a UPEPA motion. If you win your motion, the lawsuit against you is dismissed with prejudice and you get attorney's fees. In this case, the judge made a legal error when he did not grant or even rule on her UPEPA motion and dismissed her for other reasons. I'm going to talk about that next week because the district court decision, which was a clear legal error, was then affirmed by the Court of Appeals in another completely legally incorrect decision. And now we have a request for a writ of certiorari, or I said a petition for a writ of certiorari with the Utah Supreme Court that I drafted for Sylvia. And so I wanted to talk about that because I think it's actually a really interesting case, and it's something that people will find. I think you'll see how politics in Utah works and why we need more protections and more exposure of the types of things that go on. We haven't heard back about whether that petition will be granted, but I thought I'd give you guys a preview so we could talk about it more, and I'll take questions too. Okay, well, I'm at 7:01, which means I went over by a minute. Thank you so much for listening to the Goud Crowd. I'm your host, Goud. I think that's probably pretty obvious. And so we will see you next week. And in the meantime, remember today is Liberation Day. According to President Trump, we got a lot to celebrate, a lot to be happy about, so much to be hopeful for. So enjoy your week, and I will see you next time.